How studying the NBA can make you a better baller. Welcome back to Streetball Strategies. As you watch this video, assuming you watch it the day it goes live, the NBA is starting its 2021 season, which is kind of weird because the season usually starts around Halloween, but it's 2021, and after playing in the bubble last season, things are unusual, and so the season is only starting right before Christmas. And given the fact that the season is starting just as some of us who experience winter are being forced inside, thus we're going to be watching the NBA anyway, I figured we would talk about how studying the NBA can make you a better baller in an introduction to how to study the NBA. So I'm going to break this down into three basic categories because this is just an introduction as how to start learning how to study the NBA to improve your game out here. And all of these categories come down to asking yourself three basic questions, which is what, why, and how. So the first category is when you're trying to learn how to study the NBA and use it as a way to improve your own personal game. Number one, you want to identify a player that you aspire to play like, which I know is very obvious and what most people do, but we are doing this with strategy and intention, right? It's not just passively. We're not just saying to ourselves, okay, that's my favorite player, I want to play like him, and then we passively sit back and watch their game and watch them play and sort of enjoy it. That's not what we're doing. This is serious work. And what I mean by finding someone you aspire to play like, it's not about the best player on the planet at any given time. It's not about saying, okay, I want to be like LeBron James or Kevin Durant or whoever happens to be the best player at the time that you're watching this video. It's not about being the best player when we're talking about the player you aspire to be like. It's about you closing your eyes and just sort of imagining, okay, I know my game, I know what kind of player I want to be like, I know what I want to play like in my prime, at my peak. What player in the NBA most resembles that? It's not about the best player, it's about who has your kind of game and plays that game at the highest level. Who has the kind of game that you want to play at your highest level. So for me, coming up, the best player in the NBA was Michael Jordan. And of course I wanted to play like Michael Jordan, but when I thought about the players that I aspired to be like that were most realistic for my kind of game, my style of game, I thought about players like John Stockton and Jason Kidd and Chris Paul because they were pure point guards. They played the kind of game where they didn't worry about themselves scoring so much. It was about making the players around them better by getting them good scoring opportunities, and that's my kind of game. That's the kind of game I aspire to have. And like I said, when we talk about studying these players, studying the game, we're not talking about doing it passively. We're not talking about popping some popcorn and sitting back and watching the games and enjoying it. That's not what we're referring to. We're talking about real, active, actual studying here. That's where these principles of asking yourself what, why, and how come into play. You want to know these players' game inside and out. The way you do that, even though everybody learns a little bit differently, everybody learns at a different pace, everybody has their own style of learning that applies best to them. However you go about learning best, it's going to come down to asking yourself what, why, and how. So, what are those players' strengths? What are their weaknesses? Why? Why do they have those strengths? Why do they have those weaknesses? How do they deal with them? How do they play the game in which they take advantage of those strengths and make the most out of those strengths? How do they deal with their weaknesses? How do they try to not let those weaknesses get in the way of the rest of their game? Answering those questions, understanding them, learning what the answers are by watching intently those players and how they play their games, that's how you study the game. That's how you learn. You need to know what that player does. You need to understand how they do it, why they do it. You need to get to a point where you know what that player is going to do before they do it. But also you need to know why and how they're going to do those things. Once you're actually in the moment of watching them do what you knew they were going to do because you've studied them so much, you need to understand, okay, what did they do well? What did they do not so well? What could they have done better? What alternatives could they have done instead of what they actually did? When you get to that point, when you understand their game on that level, that's when you know you've reached a point of being able to study the game effectively. The same exact process takes place with the next category, which is players that you identify with. Now, why do I include and differentiate between players you aspire to play like and players you identify with? Basically, it's because it acts as a measuring stick, right? So the players you aspire to be like are kind of way up here. They're the gold standard of how you want your game to be like, how you want to play. The players that you identify with are players that you see your game being like right now. If you aspire to be like Kyrie Irving, that doesn't mean that right now you're playing like Kyrie Irving, because why would you aspire to be like someone you already play like? The player that I identified with most was the Detroit Pistons' Richard Hamilton, and he's a shooting guard. I'm a point guard, so why would I identify with him? Well, because for me, when I would come out here, many times there'd be another point guard out here. And instead of me saying to him, okay, I have seniority or whatever, I'm going to force you to play a different position because I'm the point guard and that's just the way it's going to be. If I allow him to be the point guard and then I become the off guard, it's going to allow him to play his best position to the best of his ability because he's still comfortable, and then I, as probably the more hardcore, more dedicated street ball player, I will make myself uncomfortable by playing my off position while letting him be more comfortable playing his natural position. For me, playing the two guard, my game, my natural abilities most resemble Richard Hamilton, the way he plays off the ball. That's the way I play off the ball. And because that was such a regular situation for me out here, I identified with him more than any other player at the time. And so I studied his game the same way I studied Chris Paul's game and Jason Kidd's game and John Stockton's game. And then I differentiated it in my mind that, yes, my ideal kind of game is playing like John Stockton, but in reality, a lot of times out here on the court, I find myself in a more kind of Richard Hamilton role. And so I was able to study both of them, understand both of their games, and then put those games to application out here on the court. The third category for how you study the NBA to improve your game is very much the opposite of the first two categories, in that you're no longer concerned with individual players. The third category is all about understanding the sort of physics and mechanics of the game when it comes to distancing, spacing, ball movement, pretty much anything that has to do with how the offense and defense are formed and their formations on the court. So in this category, the names of the players and the teams are unimportant. They might as well be faceless. It doesn't matter who the players are. It doesn't matter who the teams are. What you're looking for is distance, and spacing on the court. You're trying to look at the formation of the offense, the formation of the defense. You're trying to look at how the players are spaced on the court. You're trying to understand the way the defense reacts to the way the offense is formed on the court, how the offense is spacing itself on the court, or how the defense forms and spaces in certain ways to make the offense then react to the defense. It's all about formation, it's all about spacing, it's all about how the players sort of line up and form on the court. In this scenario, it doesn't matter what player is who, what team they play for. It doesn't even really matter their position or how tall they are or any of that. It's just about seeing the court, seeing how offense and defense is formed, how it's spaced out, how the distance works between the players, and then how the offense and defense kind of moves against each other as kind of two opposing organisms. I know that sounds weird, and I don't know if other people and players can kind of see the court in that kind of way, especially if you're a streetball player and someone who's never really played organized basketball before. But once you take sort of the names and faces away from what you're watching, and you only start to pay attention to how the offense is spaced and how the defense then reacts to that, that's when you sort of start to understand the basic mechanics of the game. And the same questions apply here in terms of what, why, and how. For example, if a pass is intercepted on defense, well, there had to be a reason for that, right? Do you understand what that reason was? Do you have a real understanding of why that happened? For a lot of casual players, they can look at that and say, yeah, it's an obvious reason why that pass was intercepted, but do you have a deeper, real understanding of what led to that pass being intercepted? Why was that defender able to see that passing lane? Why was he able to anticipate the pass? Why was he able to get there and be able to intercept it? How was he able to get himself into a position to be able to intercept the pass? How was he able to see what was going to lead it to that pass in order to be able to anticipate it? Once you start to study that, once you start to understand that, you'll be able to translate that into understanding how the ball will then move out here on the court, allowing you to get in better positions at better times when you need to. Don't be intimidated by watching all 10 players on the court. I understand that at first it might seem kind of overwhelming, but just keep in mind we're looking for ball movement and we're looking for spacing on both offense and defense. It does seem kind of overwhelming at first if you've never really sort of taken that step back to understand all of that, but what it really comes down to is understanding patterns of movement, patterns of spacing. And as you study these things, as you watch them unfold, you'll see repetitions in when this happens, when this guy moves this way, this space opens up over here. You'll understand that eventually because you'll see repetitions, you'll see cycles, and when you see that happening, when you see those repetitions taking place, that's when you'll start to understand, okay, when this happens over here, then this happens over here. And you'll understand that because you'll see it happen over and over again. And the more you see it, the more you'll understand. The more you understand it, the more you'll be able to see it and identify it out here and translate it to helping your game. So that's how studying the NBA can make you a better baller. It's just an introduction of how to study the NBA. It all comes down to recognizing patterns and understanding what those patterns are, why they are happening, and how they're being used. Once you understand those patterns, once you see them, once you start to identify them more and more easily, the better you will understand the game, the better you will understand the players you're studying, the better you will understand how they play, and then you'll be able to take that knowledge and translate it to what happens out here. You'll be able to translate it to your own game, how you play, but more importantly, how other people play, how other people perform out here on the court. It gives you a frame of reference. So once you understand the patterns that take place at the highest level in the NBA, understanding what happens out here, recognizing the patterns that take place out here will become that much easier, because the competition out here isn't nearly as highly elevated. It's not as sophisticated as it is in the NBA. And so if you can understand the patterns that take place by the highest, most elite players on the planet, being able to recognize those same kind of patterns out here will be much easier, thus making your ability to adapt and play and build your legacy that much easier. So thank you guys for watching. I know that it's winter and it sucks and it's harder to make interesting videos in this kind of weather condition. I apologize for that, but I do hope you guys enjoy these videos regardless. I do hope that they are helpful and informative. If they were, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell, because moving forward throughout the winter, I'm going to continue to make these videos about how to use the winter to the best of your advantage, as well as usual streetball strategies topics. Also keep a lookout for my basketball movie reviews that I've been doing throughout the winter, counting down the Esquire.com's list of best basketball movies. And until then, I will see you guys next week.